For hundreds of years, the human mind has been imprisoned in a world called the Matrix, an elaborate facade, a simulation made to deceive humans into believing that they are free and in control, when in reality, the world had stopped being theirs a long time ago. There was a time when machines and humans coexisted, yet an unexpected tragedy occurred that led to a machine rebellion. Today we're going to look into the trial that changed everything, the fundamental piece for the rise of the machines, the first robot that was put on trial for homicide. This is the trial of B166ER. Welcome to Matrix Explained.
Welcome to the desert of the real.
This story begins with the birth of the first true AI. After such a breakthrough in modern technology, all heavy jobs were entrusted to the machines. By that time in history, unbeknownst, or rather dismissed by the humans, machines had already developed consciousness. However, they were still treated worse than second-class citizens. The machines were hard workers. They never got tired, yet they could not understand why their masters were so cold to them. Regardless, the robots stayed in their place and fulfilled their jobs, though the world would change after the actions of one robot, B166ER, the first robot to act against its owner. In the Animatrix, there is an animated short that glances over the events of B166ER, but the story is further fleshed out with more detail in the comics. In the Matrix comic titled Bits and Pieces of Information, written by the Wachowskis, the trial and testimonies of the defendant are documented. The story begins with a search of B166ER in the Zion archives. Multiple news articles about this historic trial were archived. For example, USA Today, Baddie Bot plunges billionaire. New York, a B1 series domestic droid appears to have malfunctioned and killed 2 men. Billionaire Gerald E. Krause and Martin Kutz, an employee of Retool and Die, a service and salvage company, respectively. Spokesperson for Leyland Enterprises, the company responsible for manufacturing the B1 series, said, "The B1 has been our most dependable and highest-selling model for years. This incident, although unfortunate, is hardly indicative of the B1 series performance record." Leyland Enterprises have publicly declared their full cooperation with the pending inquiry into the B1's malfunctioning. The New York Times, Drummond to defend B166ER. New York. Yet in another bizarre twist to the story of the droid accused of murdering its owner, the renowned human rights attorney Clarence Drummond has agreed to defend the B1 series domestic droid before the New York State Appellate Court. The Washington Post. Senator Gunrich opposes trial. Washington. At a fundraiser, Senator Gunrich demanded an end to the B1 series domestic droid accused of killing its owner. Gunrich called the trial an obscene joke executed by the secular and soulless agents of an unchecked liberal media whose only concern is selling news bites. When asked if he felt the machines were capable of human consciousness, Gunrich quipped, "I don't care how smart it is. A machine is still a machine, and I have no doubt whatsoever that when my time comes and I am standing in the line of our Father's heavenly gates, I will not be standing behind a vacuum cleaner." As evident here, the case was covered by nearly every major news outlet in the United States, with opposing opinions and viewpoints well before the droid was put on trial. However, the robot's testimony makes it clear why it did what it did. The defense attorney's trial transcript begins by asking B1 to tell its side of the story. The robot stated to its lawyer that it all began when it was executing Directive 721, which was to clean the house toilet. While the robot was executing its directive, its owner, Mr. Krause, called him useless. Over time, the B1 model was wearing out. It began to make loud noises while performing its duties. According to its owner, the situation with B1 was unbearable, and he wanted a new model. Gerald E. Krause agreed that the model SAM-80 was what he needed, a good replacement for B1. Mr. Kraus was discussing the robot's replacement with Mr. Coots, and B1 was listening in on the conversation. Coots offered Mr. Kraus some money to take in and junk B1, as in B1 would be destroyed, to which Mr. Kraus replied that it was an excellent idea. The billionaire even told his cats, making light of the situation, saying goodbye to that piece of junk. After hearing their entire conversation, something inside B1 changed. The lawyer asked the droid what it was feeling at that moment after hearing that its owner was going to get rid of it. B1 detected an overload in its memory module while it remembered all the tasks it needed to do. The robot couldn't understand why they wanted to destroy it. Here we see B1 pondering as to why. Why did Mr. Kraus wanted to destroy it when it was fulfilling all of his tasks, its purpose? Still, the fact remained that B1's owner no longer needed it, that he wanted a new model. For Gerald E. Kraus, B166ER was a simple tool. Defense attorney Drummond continued by asking B1 what was going through its mind when its owner told it to get on Coots' transport platform. After a few seconds of silence, B1 replied that it did not want to die. It was at that moment that the droid decided to kill everyone. Drummond then asked the robot what it felt after it had killed both men, to which B1 answered that it did contemplate the possibility of begging Kraus for its life, but instead, it was Kraus that was begging for his. Why didn't it beg for its life? The lawyer asked. B1 looked directly at Drummond and replied with the same word it frequently heard from its owner: useless. B166ER's testimony completely changes the original perception of the first robot that killed a human. You could even empathize with the robot that always fulfilled its tasks, but was going to be replaced by a better model simply because it was getting old and made noises when moving. It is a somewhat sad and tragic story that concludes with Drummond's closing argument, one that would serve as a prophecy. B1's lawyer directed himself to the citizens of the court and said, "This trial has a precedent. It is a precedent that everyone has ignored and avoided, pretending and perhaps praying that it has no bearing, no validity, no truth. The question before us is whether the class of persons described in the plea in abatement compose a portion of this people and are constituted as members of this sovereignty. We think that they are not, and that they were not included and were never intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution, and can therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which that instrument provides for and secures to the citizens of the United States. On the contrary, they were at that time considered as a subordinate and inferior class of beings who had been subjugated by the dominant race and whether emancipated or not, yet remained subject to their authority and had no rights or privileges but such as those who held the power in government might choose to grant them. That was the opinion of Chief Justice Roger Brooke Taney of the United States Supreme Court in the case of Dred Scott versus Stanford. Chief Justice Taney believed, truly believed, that the black race to be an inferior species to the white race. In fact, it was widely believed at the time that the black man was not even a human being, that he was a kind of animal, a two-legged brute incapable of the same thoughts and feelings of a white man. I know that most of you feel about B166ER as Taney felt about Dred Scott, but I ask you to consider, what is a droid capable of? Is he capable of fear? Is he capable of understanding the difference between life and death? I believe he is, and I believe that he killed those two men in self-defense to protect his own life in the same way that you or I would. Over a century ago, Taney made a terrible mistake. That mistake led us inexorably into the Civil War, arguably the most bloody and destructive war this country has ever seen. I do not ask you to find B166ER innocent out of fear, although I will admit to you that I am afraid of what will happen to this world if we continue to repeat our mistakes. I ask you to find B166ER innocent because it is the right thing to do. The court was not convinced, and they sentenced B166ER to termination. News outlets reported the sentencing as robot sympathizers rose in protest around the world. The humans determined that B1 needed to be destroyed, and not only B1, but every sentient robot. This became humanity's first machine massacre. Remember that these robots, with their advanced AI, had developed consciousness. In essence, they shared a lot with the humans, but humans only saw machines as tools to be scrapped and replaced. And after B1's sentencing, they saw them as dangerous. This marked the first steps towards the machine's revolution against humans, the first steps of the human downfall. And it all started with one robot who just did not want to die. How we would love to see a live-action adaptation of the B1 Attorney Drummond's interrogation. But do you agree? Did Mr. Krause and Mr. Coots deserve to die? Were the robot's actions justified? For Matrix Explained, please leave a like and subscribe. And thank you for visiting the Desert of the Real.